awfully nice of you to be here at the Strand. One of my favorite places in the world to go is downstairs. Spend a lot of time there.
Which floor?
Both the first and the second floor. I spent a lot of, my office used to be on the corner, and I would bribe myself, if I finished this scene by 4 o'clock, I could come here and pick out a book. And if it was a really long scene, it could be an art book. So I have a beautiful library, and I got my work done. And he was in here for the very first time this afternoon.
Yes, this is my Virgin flight. I'm on the Upper West Side. This could be Cincinnati, as far as I'm concerned.
I know.
You know how we are. We go to our work, and we go to where we live, and we shop, and occasionally we go other places. But there, it's appalling. I left town. I came to New York in the late 60s, and then I went to San Diego to run the Globe for about 25 years. And when I came back, there were worlds going on that didn't exist when I'd left. Soho, Tribeca, these didn't exist when I left in the 80s, So I feel humiliated and reduced to tears that I have not ventured forth out here.
And now there's Brooklyn.
And there's Brooklyn, right.
So let me just ask you one general question, and you guys can just go off. What is a Nance?
Oh, you go.
Me go. Nance is a expression from the 30s. It's short for Nancy boy, and it was used in burlesque. It was a stock character, and it was a very effeminate man. It was sort of like a racial or cultural stereotype that were very big in vaudeville. But in burlesque, for whatever reason, the Nance shows up in a lot of these old sketches that I was doing research on. And he would usually just have maybe 6 or 7 lines, and was really smart and funny, and so that's what a Nance was. It's a burlesque character. It's short for Nancy boy. And it was also used as a slang expression in the 30s. And then it went away, and then they got rid of the Nances in burlesque sketches. When I saw them when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, they would always have burlesque sketches on TV, on variety shows like Dean Martin or Carol Burnett. They'd have like a tribute to burlesque on Laugh-In, and they would do these old routines, but they just got rid of the Nance. So that's a Nance.
It's also, even though I don't think this is true, but this tradition of synthesizing a personality or a caricature goes back to Italy, goes back to Goldoni, Pierrot, Pierrette, Harlequin. They're all types. And it's a quick way to characterize and to initiate a kind of dramatic structure. So you play that, it's like Bottom handing out the parts in Midsummer Night's Dream. There are, Flute is an Nance, basically. Yeah. He does the girl. And straight on through our history, Bert Lahr, as the Cowardly Lion, is Nance-esque. Jack Benny was, in an odd way, Nance-esque. So it has a lot of reverberations, and just because it went away when it was stifled politically in the 30s, because it's a funny idea. It's kind of, to me, appalling what's happened with all the stereotypes that we can't use anymore because they're politically incorrect. My father used to do more accents than Irish, all of them hilariously funny and accurate and adorable. And people at that time thought they were fabulously funny. Now we can't do it. We're not allowed to do it. But it creeps out like crabgrass in other ways. And this necessity to pair, for instance, a buxom woman with a sissy guy, you start to laugh because there's something comic about the fact that no matter how beautiful she is, it ain't gonna work. And that's the rule of farce. That's two parallel lines that are going to meet no matter what you do, and then you separate them and you've got something else. That was a very erudite answer. We're proud of our work together.
So, I mean, this is a question for you. What drew you to the novel to turn it into a?
Well, there isn't a novel. There's a book by George Chauncey
Right.
called Gay New York,
Right.
which is a reference book. It is nothing but history of gay life in New York from the turn of the century up to like the end of World War II. That sort of is the beginning or the middle of World War II. And it was a book that was, when it came out, everybody had. And I read it, and I skimmed sections of it, but I hadn't read the whole thing. So I had the great fortune of getting a call from Sundance saying that they would let me have a cabin in Wyoming, and they would feed me, and I would be there for about 3 weeks to write whatever I wanted. It had to be something new. Couldn't have commercial affiliation in any way. Basically they give it to playwrights to write something you wouldn't normally write. And I had done a benefit for my theater company, which is No More Drama Department. I did a benefit for them. Somebody said, do an evening of burlesque. So I went to Lincoln Center Library and had read all these burlesque sketches. And I kept coming across this character, Nance, and I wrote them in the sketch, and I kind of came up with my versions of the sketches, and we did that. And then I was obsessed with, there's a theater, I live right around the neighborhood, on Irving Place. There was a theater called the Irving Place Theater that was torn down in the 80s. And it was a beautiful Bernice Abbott photograph of that I had as my screensaver on my computer. So I was on a plane, and I started to read. I grabbed the George Chauncey book as something to read on the plane. I was reading it, and he said the Irving Place Theater was known for its Nance on stage, who was very funny, and also known, the cop said, for Nance behavior in the balcony. And I went, oh, that's fun. And they went, Nance, oh, that was in the sketch, was the Nance, and the Irving Place. So it all just seemed to happen somewhere flying over the middle of a country. I was in the air, and so I sat down, and I was there on a cabin in Wyoming looking at cows and fracking wells, and I just sort of went, well, I'll write. And I just wrote the very first scene, and then I wrote a comedy sketch to follow it, to reverberate what happened in life. And I thought, what if I did a whole play like that constantly went back and forth? That would be nice. And then after I finished that first scene, I looked at it, I said, that's really cool, but who is going to be able to play a touching scene and then be hilariously funny afterwards? I thought, oh, Nathan Lane would be good. And I thought, but he's not going to do it. I think I'll come up with a list later. And that's how it happened. I had the first act done and 2 scenes of the second act done. And then it took a couple of years after that to come to terms with what it was. So that's how it all kind of interested me, this sort of research. And this is my.
Did you just send it to him?
I did. Well, we knew each other socially. And then when I was doing Xanadu, he sent me an email. He got my email address and said, I was doing this thing called Cubby Bernstein on YouTube, this kind of silly, goofy character I invented. And he sent me an email saying, like, this is so hilarious, I love it. I said, do you want to be in the next one? He said, sure. And he showed up. We used to take like little cameras like that and just film like the cast backstage with this imaginary character named Cubby Bernstein. And it was also the day Nathan showed up to film his. It was the day they were filming the show for Lincoln Center Library. So there were 3 cameras and a trailer outside. He thought, this is really overproduced for YouTube. But we hit it off, and when I finished the script, I sent it to him it was like on a Thursday afternoon, and I said, read this when you have time. I think it's something special. That's all I said. And then he emailed me the next morning and said, I sat down to read it. I read the whole thing. I have to do this. Let's do a reading. And then like about a week and a half later, we were in my living room with a bunch of amazing actors reading through the script. And it's been pretty great ever since. Then Jack O'Brien got involved. My head exploded with excitement over that. It was a big deal.
I don't know how that happened. You went to Lincoln Center.
And then Nathan said, we should go to Lincoln Center with this because I said, I had an offer to do it because I happen to have a friend who's a producer in London in town and came by for the reading, and he said, I would love to produce this on the West End. And I said, we got an offer to do it on the West End. You want to do it in England? And he said, oh, Nathan, do we really want to go to England? And he said, let's do it in America, and let's do it with Lincoln Center, though, so we're safe. We'll do it like just so people can catch on to it, like the Lyceum Theater. People are going to catch on to it. Oh, I just happened to be, I was in the midst of being accosted by a Hello Kitty, and I was running for my life away from Elmo, who was touching me. And next thing I knew, I said there was a theater. It said the Nance. I'll come in here to while away an afternoon.
Right.
And I know Nathan Lane. I know that face. So that's it.
And then Andre loved it, and then
Andre loved it, and then we said, who should direct this? And Andre and Laughing Boy Nathan Lane both said Jack O'Brien. I said, he's not going to do. He does Shakespeare or Stoppard. He's not going to.
Hairspray.
He's going to. Well, that's true.
I can be vulgar.
It's vulgar.
How did the collaboration between you? How does that work once you start staging it and you're?
Well, before they're staging, there's talking. There's a lot of talking.
And readings.
And
we
readings.
We did several readings and talked about it, and because Douglas is the kind of writer and the kind of professional that he is, you don't have to, and this is unusual, even with skilled writers. You don't have to prompt him. He's the first person to say, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. That isn't working, So you don't have to push him. You just have to sort of see what his process is. We felt, after one of the readings, there was a crucial scene missing. That there was a scene between Ned and Chauncey. We wanted to know why the relationship didn't work. And both Andre and I felt that, and he felt it too. And there was a while, and then that glorious scene came back to us, and then we were off and running, weren't we?
Yeah.
And because he's produced theater before and can direct and knows a lot, I was willing to take whatever he wanted to give. But Nathan, of course, is a compendium of theatrical ideas, and I'm not exactly back on my heels. So there was a lot of energy in the room. It was glorious, wasn't it?
It was a lot of fun. It was
Genuinely a lot of fun.
It was the right kind of fun. It was like hard work fun. I would come in and say, well, I can rewrite that scene, and Nathan would say, if you rewrite it, I'll put it in tonight. He was really dangerous and exciting that way. So that was a challenge for me to always do stuff.
How long did that go on for?
Up until we closed. Up until we froze the show for the critics.
The night before the critics started was the last changes we put in.
Yeah.
And what was the last change?
Do you remember? It was a word. There was
the whole set of costumes went in for one thing.
There was a whole new number.
Yeah, no,
I forget what it was. There was a word that was changed.
There were several.
That we cut and then we put it back.
No,
in.
there were several. There was a handful of stuff that went in.
Yeah, there were lots of little touches that went in, but
it goes this way, then that way, then this way, and I'm fond of saying when we put changes into a show. I like to put the change in, then leave them alone for a couple of days. Because, first of all, it goes in and you think, it could be all right, it got something. That line got something where we weren't getting anything. Then the second time, they're remembering what they did and sort of taking the note. On the third performance, they begin to absorb it, and you can tell what's real. So, you can't just sit and watch the stew cook. You've got to leave it.
And it was a challenge, but a thrill to be creating a show for the first time on Broadway. That was it was never daunting, but there was when we first did a section. I remember in dress rehearsal during a run. I remember you turning to me and go, "Does that look right?" And I just said, I don't know. I've never seen this show before. I've never to have a show the first time you see it on Broadway with a big turntable set spinning around in Nathan Lane, getting into a dress.
Stage was an immediate. That came to you guys. I mean, because that's
No.
brilliant. And
This
it's
is, I had discussions with John Lee Beatty, and we had conversations as to, and I always begin with what's needed, not what I want, or even sometimes what they describe. But when I think, okay, because I ran a theater for 25 years. I know what it costs. So you can sort of have all these castles in the air, but you have to meet your costs, and you have to be responsible to the producers. And so I start thinking, okay, what do I absolutely have to have here? And the first thing that occurred to me was you were seeing people on stage, and then you were seeing people, he said, in the wings, which meant that backstage and the wings. Immediately I said, well, that's a turntable. We have to have a turntable. And John Lee Beatty and I started to discuss it. And he found that right, and he found that right. And John Lee went away and came back with this model, this little model, which was that gorgeous concept. And the apartment changed back and forth to the automat. The backstage area was the backstage area, and the stage was the stage. And it was all practical. It was all working because you saw things happening. And the only note that I gave him is I said, I don't think you're taking advantage of the backstage area. There's a lot that goes on there, and I need more area here. But I don't need more area on the stage, and I don't think the apartment should be that big. So he figured that out, and then he presented us with this gorgeous world that was detailed and authentic and beautiful and sexy and imaginative and rude. And I had, as I would think ordinarily, I had the intention of sitting down with the company and working through the script, psychologically, breaking the beats down, talking about the history, one thing and another. First day, actually the week before we went into rehearsal, we read the last version. Nathan Lane was off book. That's what he does. He's the most professional person I can imagine. And he was on top of the script. Johnny Orsini, who plays his paramour, this is his debut. He's never done much before. He was just real. And I thought, well, my leading actor's done. My second actor, I can't mess him up. I've got to let him experience this, but I can't direct him. He's got to just experience what's going on, and I'll edit. So I thought, I'm going to change the whole thing. So we had no work on the table, because all of the actors had read it. They knew what was going on. We started with that rabbit warren. And we started working physically, blocking it quickly. I blocked the first act in less than a week, all of it. And I just threw it out there because I figured what they needed to know was where they were going backstage, where they did a quick change, when they made another door. I mean, you should see that thing. It's a sort of, I don't know, gerbil's wedding cake. I mean, there's little staircases and doors and things turn into other things. It's just bizarre. And so, but once they got it in their minds, they could then make sense out of it. I couldn't rehearse it and then throw that at them during technical rehearsals. We never would have made it. So it was the exact opposite of how I've ever done anything else. And it was John Lee Beatty's genius that caused that.
It really is an amazing set in that you can, if you go up the stairs out of the apartment, if you turn to the right, you're going to go down the staircase on stage, the lighted staircase, and if you turn to the left, you're going to continue to go up the stairs, be seen through the window, and going to wind up coming down the large staircase backstage. So you're always on, and the thing can spin, and you can stand still and just be on a totally make an entrance. It's a pretty crazy set.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And how are people jumping? I mean, the costume changes are really fast, too.
Yes.
And so how does that go? I mean, with the stage, I mean, that's sort of amazing with Nathan.
Just lots of, just remember tech dress rehearsal, lots of like, Jack, if I could just have Lou come out and just do 2 jokes, Jack, I would be so happy.
They were back there trying to, at one point Nathan has to get into drag. So that's, you know, a wig and makeup and all that sort of stuff. So we had to create a number long enough by the stopwatch to make sure you could make the change. So a lot of it was practical.
And I would add jokes, or we'd add a number.
Absolutely.
To cover the changes.
Yes, Nathan's first appearance as the Nance, he had to go from the automat costume into his other costume and get on time. And Lou Stadlin came out and did his number and started hitting the bell, and Nathan wasn't ready. So he came up with 2 more hilarious jokes, which earned us time on, you know, so that, and also Nathan would say, because he's never off, he would say, I just have to breathe. I just need to gather my thoughts. If I can just gather my thoughts. I don't ever go back once this starts. I never want to know what I'm doing to those terribly sweet people. The hell that I'm putting them through. I don't want to know. I'm completely innocent of the whole thing.
So during previews, you give notes, right? And then.
Oh, yes.
And then, but do you come back during the? How does that work? I mean,
What do you mean?
Do you then come back, you know, after it's been running for?
Oh, a director's, ostensibly, a director's work is done on the opening night.
And that's it. Yeah.
And you have a responsibility, if you care about your actors in your company and you want to maintain the integrity, you do check. But I have a brilliant production staff, production stage manager and 2 assistants who have been there from the first word.
Right.
And so, and Rolt Smith, who's our PSM, he did Catch Me If You Can with me, and he did something else with me. And I know, I've read his production reports. I know he has a very keen eye. I know that he pays attention to detail. If things go off the wheel, he'll tell me and I come. But sometimes I sneak in anyway.
Now, what about the details for a 1930s set? I mean, how?
First of all, Lincoln Center is so hilarious in there. You know, there's someone obviously with a doctorate whose job is to do the props at Lincoln Center. Like that would be, I'm doing my doctorate and I've got the job at Lincoln Center. My life is complete now. So, like I remember the moment Nathan said, could I have a newspaper of the period that would be maybe like a show business magazine or something? And so the next day, there was a variety from 1937, the year the play takes place, the week that the scene took place.
And there's another automat scene in the second act at the end of the show, and they had the exact variety from that day too.
I know. So we'd be alone. He goes like, Kitty Carlisle signs 3-picture deal. Wow. So, but that's sort of what it's like, and the pictures and everything. It was. I love the type of books I read for pleasure are like E.L. Doctorow or Eric Larson. There's a wonderful book called Nervous Splendor about Vienna at the turn of the century. I like putting myself into a period and knowing all the people who were there and all the world of it. I throw myself into worlds. And everything up until now I've done, with the exception of Xanadu, has been, and Sister Act to some degree, it's been contemporary. It's been all contemporary stuff. And I knew there was a part of me that loves throwing myself into a world, and so I threw myself into 1937, and it meant a lot of Turner Classic Movies, which meant my fiancé Louis would walk in and go, is it black and white? Oh. He said he would go to bed, listen you, like, oh, I don't want to hear that anymore. I would go online and read the New York Times every day. That day, I would read the New York Times of 1937 to understand what was going on. I listened to a lot of radio programs just to get slang down and rhythm down. There are expressions I still don't know exactly what they mean, but they're in the show and I use them properly. I just don't know exactly. I bet Mr. Rudnick's in a pet. I don't know what that means exactly, but that was from an article.
Good night, nurse.
Good night, nurse. Well, that's my parents. And then I grew up around Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, which is magically trapped in the late 30s. Just what they choose to discuss, how expressions they use. It's a wonderful place that way, that you don't feel like you're in a contemporary place. So I love doing research, and I look forward to doing it for other projects, and to really throw myself into it.
I mean, what drew you both to, I mean, you sort of said how it came about, but I mean, what was it about creating this character? And I mean, you had this book that was about gay life in the 1930s, but what was it? What were you, I mean, what was it about him? What was it? I mean, there's little bits of politics sort of dabbled in, but it's not, there isn't a real political. We know that there's socialism, and that he's conservative, but what was it about?
For me, what I was drawn to when I was writing it was that there was a level of self-loathing I had as a gay man who's over 50, and then I would occasionally have assistants or work with people in the theater who were in their 20s who didn't seem to have it or have a sense of it. But they didn't have a sense of fear, and they also didn't have a sense of
Separateness.
The separateness, and they didn't particularly have great senses of humor. They weren't very, they weren't really fun to be with. Like, in a way that what I assumed to be gay was when I was a kid. When I was young and going to gay bars, I was so fascinated with the idea of being gay that I spent a lot of time talking to older gay men, listening to their stories. It just fascinated me. What was life like? What did you do? How did you? And they would tell me these old jokes from the 30s and 40s of like, it's always involved a raid on a gay bar. That's always like the joke. And then there's a raid on a gay bar and blah, blah, blah happens. And I'm just so fascinated with that world. And so I knew that I wanted to write about that. And when I started, gay marriage wasn't such an issue. But now we see it as an issue that's not just about gay marriage. It's about treating some people better than other people. And that's what's interesting about it, and how when you do that to people, what the people then do to themselves, that they don't think that they're equal. And so those are the things that were all on my mind as I was writing this and working on this. And as I was, creating a family and getting a partner and all those things at that point in my life, and dealing with all the other stuff in my life.
What about you? You did a project.
Well, I've actually never done a gay play, and is there a reason for that? I'm not sure. There was never one that I really liked. As a producer of a theater in San Diego, a very conservative community, where I was raising money a lot of the time, I was fairly circumspect, and nothing really came along. And yet, our business, basically, in the theater, is pretty small. We all know each other. And I would always run into Larry Kramer, who would say, "You've got to do something for your people." And I kept saying, "The Irish are doing just fine." He didn't find that funny. But I thought to myself, I knew what he meant. I needed to connect with something, because I don't think of myself as a gay director. I think of myself as a professional that happens to be gay. I don't have an axe to grind. I do not have a dog in this fight. But I don't do anything that doesn't move me. I don't do anything that I don't feel I emotionally understand, connect with. I've turned on a lot of really good pieces because I just didn't think they were for me. I couldn't make them make sense. And the happy endings and the sentimentality and all that sort of stuff, it doesn't wash with me. It just doesn't. This one, I realized that I had to do this because I felt there were so many aspects of the play that I was comfortable in, including the sketch work and the hilarity and all that stuff. But I wanted to see a relationship stripped of its artificiality that was not perfect, because so few are. I'm working on a Shakespeare, which I'm going to do for Lincoln Center next year, and I was realizing that the marriages in Shakespeare are terrible. There are very few. You know what the happiest marriage in Shakespeare is? The Macbeths. Oh, I'm serious. They have a very good marriage. They talk to each other. They share things. There's obviously good sex going on there. Oh no, they're fine. But the other married couples are not in good shape. Not at all. The courtships are delirious. And so I thought to myself, life isn't, guys, happy endings. And as a man of un certain âge, a gay man of un certain âge, I've seen a great deal of warp and woof over the years between what's allowed and what isn't. And this piece, I thought to myself, boy, wouldn't it be fascinating if we could tap into that, if we could actually put that on the stage. And I'm extremely proud of the fact that I think we did.
No, I think you definitely did. I get the complexity of him slowly, when he becomes likable is when, I don't want to give too much away, but when he's able to sort of, for me at least, when he doesn't tell on that he doesn't call the police on his boyfriend. Suddenly you see how wounded he is and in many ways, and how self-loathing, and how did you, just crafting him, what were your thoughts? You drew on those conversations that you had, you drew
I did.
on...
I drew on aspects of myself, on qualities that I see in other people. I wanted to be sure that if he was going to be a conservative Republican, that he actually, at the end, was a moral and good person. And that was important to me, as it was important that the liberals don't save the day. As someone who spent all their time coming of age in a gay, and to see, just if you have a chance to remember or look up how gay people were treated by the Democratic Party in the 70s and 80s. Basically, they took our money and said, go chase yourself, we don't need you. And at every chance ran away from us. So as someone who grew up in that environment, I wanted to say, causes will go on with or without you. You have to define your life within that. So those were things that fascinated me. And Chauncey is a good... happy endings are really interesting to me in that Americans need a happy ending. We get anxious when there's not a happy ending. I can feel it at the end of the play that they want a happy ending. When I would go into chat rooms and people would, on internet rooms or whatever, and read, people would rewrite the play for me, which was very generous of them, to create happy endings that when you read them, they broke my heart because they're so ludicrous. Like someone said, why doesn't Chauncey just get in a car, drive to Los Angeles, and make movies with Preston Sturges? I was like, well, now let's just look at where he is. He can't leave the island of Manhattan legally. He has a police record for homosexual behavior. He's got to get a car. He's got to get gasoline. He's got to drive across the country. Oh, and then meet Preston Sturges.
Who wants to work with
Who wants to work with him. But there's a critic, in one of my plays, I have a Google search engine, which is my way of finding out where my plays are being done, just so I can keep a record of it and make sure I'm getting cash for it. The critics in Texas always put in new endings for my plays so that they'll be happy. With this sort of like, oh, here he goes again. Really? Yeah, that's like, why couldn't, in a Little Dog Laugh, they said, why couldn't the movie star fall in love with the room service waiter instead of a male prostitute? They could have been happy. It is a need we have to have happy endings, that if you go to any of the, people say, well, that all started with Rocky, the movie Rocky. Once we had Rocky. But look at Rocky again. It's not a happy, he doesn't win. He loses. There was a sense of pathos. Talia Shire. No, I'm kidding.
No, but
mixed blessing.
Love
It's a mixed blessing.
overcomes all,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Okay, why don't we take about some questions
About
from the
time, sure.
audience? How's that? Any questions?
We'll take exactly 7 questions.
Let's
I don't know
see.
why that number came to me.
I'll start. Is there anything that didn't make it into the very final show that you missed, scene that you missed, like sketch?
Oh, I don't miss any of it. There's stuff that's not there, but I don't miss it.
No.
There was a sketch that was longer that we cut down to like a little bit of it. That was too long. There was a number that was hilariously overproduced. That it's one of those things where you look up that would involve gnomes and fairies in fairyland.
With no space for them.
But the gnomes had hula hoop waistlines, and they would run
It
out.
was adorable. It didn't make any sense at all.
But you would look, and I remember that they were all on stage dancing, and I turned to John Lee Beatty, the set designer, and I said, "This is like the picture that you see in old theater books, and you go, what the hell was this show?" Like that's what it looked like. So I don't miss it, but I have pictures of it, which I cherish. But no, nothing. You don't miss stuff. You
No, there's a rightness when you get it right that you feel like a headache's gone away. And that's what you're waiting for. Now it's organic, you know.
Not a happy ending.
Is it? Well, it's a happy ending.
Are you asking if it is?
It is a happy, and it is an interesting ending. I don't know. I truly don't know what happens to Chauncey at the end of the play. To me, he fades away, but I don't know. Maybe he ends up doing wardrobe and being bitchy and funny. I don't know. I think Ned is going on to a beautiful life.
Oh, I think so too.
There's a whole. I could happily write a sequel of Ned going off into. There are all these great documentaries about gay men in the 40s. There's one about This Is the Army, which was sort of the Irving Berlin show that toured during the war effort, this Broadway show, which is all the Broadway chorus boys, which there's a movie of it with Ronald Reagan where they show clips of the This Is the Army show, which is the gayest thing you would ever hope to see. There's a section where they do the stage door canteen, and it's the chorus boys in drag doing impressions of the Broadway leading ladies of the day. Because really, when you've just lost a limb in Italy, the first thing you want to see is a really good Jane Cowell impression. I think you just watch, and you watch it, and I saw it at the film forum, and you just saw everyone in the room going like, "What? A Lynn Fontanne? That boy does a very good Lynn Fontanne." You know.
In my sequel, Ned becomes Farley Granger.
There you go. Oh, probably that'd be even better.
Yeah, don't you think?
You have to date Arthur Lawrence.
Well,
though.
somebody like that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I saw The Entertainer years ago, which is a wonderful film. I only saw it once, but I always meant to see it. Perhaps this play is just beginning, so perhaps it's a little forward of me. Could you see this as a film? You know, there is this tradition. I'm thinking about Lenny. I'm thinking about The Entertainer. And you talked about the Harlequin tradition. You know, the comic and the tragic, it's an archetype, just like fairy tales. It's a very powerful archetype, and usually powerful archetypes make wonderful films. Nathan Lane is a wonderful film actor as well as.
Well, we'd have to do it with Nathan, or Nathan would physically kill me.
Yes, he would.
No, I could see it as a film. I could see it as a film.
Easily. As a matter of fact, I think it would make a fantastic film.
It'd be a nice HBO movie.
Yeah, it really
could be
would. Yeah.
But I love.
Are you a producer?
Damn it. Yeah. But The Entertainer was something a play that I read when I was in the middle of it. I took a break and I read that play, saying like, how did he do that? What did he do? Because he's so brilliant at that. And there's another play called Bright Room Called Day by Tony Kushner, which is about sort of a group of friends, just the noose tightening on them. And I read that also, 2 plays that I love a lot.
Did you see the film also?
Of The Entertainer? Yeah, the Turner Classic Movies. It says in black and white. I was watching it alone.
Any more questions?
Considering the nature of the show, did your earlier work at the APA and drama department help influence how you would approach the play at
I think he wouldn't have, boy, does he know that theater from the APA. Oh, my God.
I grew up there in that theater. I was a kid. I was a college student that was pulled into APA. And so I know every crook and nanny and backstage ghost at the Lyceum. I've also did the Invention of Love there, which was a very happy experience. So I'm that's like my baby pool. I love that place. So
I think there's a quality to the show that a lot of theater people like it because at the very end of it is about something that theater people hate, which is censorship, but it's also about a company disbanding, which is a part of theater life is you say goodbye all the time.
a lifetime.
It's a lifetime of goodbyes, but it's also, that's why I wrote a one-act play once called Theater People Have Such Big Hellos. But it's always like, because you're just happy they're still alive. You're like, darling, hugs. But it is that you disband and you get spread all apart. And this was awful. I mean, this was really, there's something that happened in life that I wouldn't put in the play because it was so over the top, but it's true, is that when they were raiding the burlesque theaters, it was in the cards, they were just going to shut them down anyway, but they had this weird month where they were just raiding them, is LaGuardia himself for photo ops would be the judge in night court to rule on them. Gee, I wonder how that went. To rule on them. I mean, it's really unbelievable that this...
The delicious thing for me was that one of my mentors was Joan Houseman, who was involved with APA Phoenix. And he, of course, started the Federal Theater Program. So Doug had this world that was that abutted contacts that I grew up with. At one point, he has the stripper run out and say, "I'm going to jingle my friend Will," and he said that was Will Gear, who played in APA, was Grandpa Walton on television, but who was an actor who was blacklisted at that point. And Houseman employed Will Gear as a gardener to keep him, because he had children, to keep him going and until he could sneak back on the stage. So for me, there was this extraordinary feeling of the smoke of history curling around me, and those voices, how they would have loved this play, how they would have loved seeing it.
Question about the end of the show, as Evelyn is standing on stage and he's there alone and part of the set falls apart. I was just very shocked when that happened. And I'm wondering why. That's probably the only part of the show that I felt myself question why. And maybe because it made me feel sad because I physically saw his life falling apart and the set falling apart. Is it meant to be that way, or did I miss something?
That's pretty good. I mean,
Doesn't get better than that.
I had a very strong feeling that the last thing I wanted to see was a light swinging from light to black to light to black. I didn't really know how we were going to do it, and I talked to Doug about it very early. I got that image immediately, that because there was this extraordinary ending, and I wanted something like the cherry orchard, the harp string that breaks, something that you don't understand, that you're not allowed to explain, that the world goes on creatively and destructively, and we either go on with it or we don't. He's at a crossroads, and he goes out nostalgically to have a look on stage and to sort of test if there's any, substance left of him, and then the rude world wakes him up. So I don't know either what it means. It feels poetic to me, but he liked it, and I did too.
I like the image of fading. It's like, I just think of people who fade away and how life is.
He's there, he's not. He's there, he's not.
Life is awful that way.
Let's take this last question.
Oh, as a photographer, I never hear in theater talks people talking about the lighting designer and working with them, and that's one of my specific interests. I'm curious. I haven't seen the show, but just lighting and sound design in terms of the support of that for the
I come from a great rich tradition of people who use light and sound in elaborate and very, very sophisticated ways, starting with Gene Rosenthal in terms of the theater on forward. It was very important to me that the sound be natural, because even though we have incredible equipment now and everybody expects to be mic'd, yeah, I don't know, I don't. It's natural sound, because it would have been natural sound. And we have a live orchestra backstage. That's a complicated thing, because they have to be mic'd in order to be heard where the orchestra would be if there were an orchestra pit there, which there isn't. So it's matching natural voices with recorded sound, with amplified sound.
You're giving them the orchestra, even though they're backstage,
Yeah.
the perspective as if they
Yeah.
in front.
And then when you go backstage and you see the actors performing into the wings, the sound then comes from there. So it's very subtle and very sophisticated and quite beautiful. And we had a great group of people working on that.
It was really wonderful when we wrote these period-sounding songs, that when they got into there with the band, we had to retrain people how to sing in a 30s style, which is you don't necessarily hit all the notes, you just get it out and over. So it's all like this. It's all happy there. But if you listen to the recordings, that's the way they sing. It's like, hello, my baby. Hello, you're not hitting all the notes, you're just getting it across. And that was really, when Lou discovered that was so delightful.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
both
you.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. It's really special.